Vancouver's 800-meter Trump Tower shattered. Window panels rained onto Coal Harbour. In 2013, one of Vancouver's most ambitious real estate projects was reaching its final stages. The Trump International Hotel and Tower was supposed to be a masterpiece. 36 stories of pure luxury overlooking Coal Harbour. Donald Trump himself had put his name on it. The building was worth $800 million. It was the tallest residential tower in British Columbia. Every detail was supposed to be perfect. Every window, every panel, every system was engineered by the best teams in North America. But in the spring of 2014, something went catastrophically wrong. Window panels started shattering and falling from the building. Not one panel, not a handful. Dozens of panels came crashing down onto the streets and waterfront below. Residents didn't know if it was safe to walk near the building. Media outlets descended on Vancouver asking the same question. How did the most expensive real estate project in the city's history turn into a falling glass nightmare? This is the story of Trump Tower Vancouver. The ambition that crashed down. The engineering failures that no one saw coming. The city that learned a hard lesson about ultra-luxury development. And the man whose name would forever be attached to one of Vancouver's biggest architectural disasters. If you've ever wondered what happens when mega projects go wrong, or how a building with an $800 million price tag can literally fall apart, this story answers both. Subscribe so you don't miss what happened next, because it's not what you'd expect. Let's go back to where this story really started. Vancouver in the early 2000s was transforming faster than almost any other city in North America. The city was becoming a global destination for wealthy investors from China, Russia, India, and the Middle East. Billionaires from around the world were looking to invest in Canadian real estate because it was stable, it was growing, and it had seemingly unlimited potential. The Coal Harbour waterfront was one of the most coveted spots on the planet. It offered water views, proximity to downtown, and the prestige of living in one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. High-rises were climbing skyward. Cranes filled the air. Construction sites seemed to appear overnight. And developers were thinking bigger than ever before. They were thinking international. They were thinking iconic. They wanted to build things that would be remembered. That's when Westbank Projects Corporation, one of Canada's most ambitious developers, decided to bring something unprecedented to Vancouver. They didn't just want a luxury tower. They wanted a statement, a landmark, something that would announce to the world that Vancouver was in the same league as New York, London, and Dubai. So they did something bold. They partnered with Donald Trump. This was 2011. Trump was riding high. The Trump Organization had done international hotels before, but never in Canada. Never in a market that was this sophisticated. Never on a waterfront that was this valuable. The plan was to build a 36-story residential tower on the edge of Coal Harbour, the tallest residential building in British Columbia at that time. 438 feet of glass and steel rising above the waterfront, 28 million square feet of total space, 214 residential units that would sell for between $2 million and $6 million each, with penthouses going for significantly more. The building would include a luxury hotel, a high-end restaurant with panoramic views of the harbor and mountains, and a full-service spa with swimming pools. The lobby was designed to be a statement piece, with soaring ceilings and carefully curated luxury finishes. Parking was underground, with secure access. The building would feature a concierge service, meeting rooms, and all the amenities expected of a world-class luxury property. The architectural design was supposed to turn heads. It had a distinctive curved facade. The building spiraled upward like it was twisting. The glass panels were precision cut. Each one was a specific size and angle. The exterior was meant to catch the light differently depending on the time of day and the angle you were looking at it from. Construction began in 2011. By 2012, the structural concrete was rising impressively. The tower was climbing skyward month by month. Cranes were working around the clock, moving materials and equipment up the sides of the building. The cost climbed to $800 million, then higher. That made it one of the most expensive real estate projects ever built in Canada at that time. But Westbank and Trump weren't cutting corners, or so they said. Every detail mattered. Every system had to be perfect. They said they were building something that would last for generations. The window panels were being manufactured by a specialized company with an international reputation. These weren't standard windows that you'd find in typical buildings. Each panel was custom fitted to the building's unique curved facade, which meant each one had to be individually engineered and manufactured. The panels were double glazed, meaning two panes of glass with insulating gas between them. They had specialized coatings that would reflect heat in the summer to keep the building cool and retain heat in the winter to keep it warm. This would make the building more energy efficient and more comfortable for residents. The panels were installed with precision engineering. The tolerances were measured in millimeters. The sealants were specialized formulations designed to accommodate movement, or at least they were supposed to. By early 2014, the building was nearly complete. Construction workers were doing the final inspections. Residents were starting to move in. The first people to live in Trump Tower, Vancouver, were arriving. They paid premium prices for premium views. They expected perfection. And then, around March 2014, something unexpected happened. Workers noticed something wrong. A window panel on the upper floors had a stress fracture in it. It wasn't a catastrophic break. It was a thin line running through the glass. They documented it. They took photos. They wondered how it had happened. Then another panel cracked. Then another. Within days, it became clear this wasn't random. There was a pattern to the failures. The cracks were appearing in panels on the south and west-facing sides of the building, the sides that took the most sunlight, the most temperature changes. Westbank initiated an immediate investigation. They brought in engineers from multiple disciplines: structural engineers, glass specialists, materials scientists, and installation experts all examined the panels. They tested the installation methods. They ran thermal simulations. They looked at weather data from the previous months. What they discovered was deeply troubling. The window panels were failing because of thermal stress, but not in the way anyone had anticipated. Here's what was happening. During the day, the sun would heat the glass surface to temperatures of 150 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit. The panels would expand. At night, the temperature would drop to 40 or 50 degrees. The panels would contract. This constant expansion and contraction, sometimes happening over the course of just 12 hours, was putting enormous stress on the edges of the glass. The panels were moving up to a quarter inch with each cycle. The sealant that was supposed to accommodate this movement couldn't handle it. But there was much more to it than that. The design of the building's curved facade meant that some panels were being installed at angles that created uneven pressure distribution. The curved shape looked beautiful, but it created engineering challenges that a standard rectangular glass tower wouldn't have. Some panels were tilted at 15 degrees from vertical. Others were at 20 degrees. This meant they were experiencing different amounts of thermal stress depending on their orientation. The panels themselves might have had microscopic defects that weren't caught during quality control at the factory. Some panels had hairline cracks in the coating that nobody noticed until they started experiencing the thermal stress. The caulking around the panels might have been degrading faster than expected because it was exposed to more direct sunlight than typical installations. Or there might have been an issue with the way the panels were being held in place, with the structural supports not providing adequate flexibility to accommodate the movement. Whatever the cause, the glass was failing, and it was failing at height. The building stood 36 stories above the street. A window panel from the upper floors would fall at accelerating speed. By the time it hit the ground, it would have tremendous force behind it. In April 2014, the situation got worse. A panel actually fell. It crashed down onto the street below. Nobody was hit. It could have killed someone. It could have landed on a parked car. It could have shattered through a storefront. The fact that no one was injured was luck, not design. Westbank immediately shut down the building's exterior. They didn't want anyone on the streets directly below the tower. They put up barriers. They posted warnings. They began a massive investigation to figure out which panels were at risk and how to fix them. The story exploded across media outlets like nothing Vancouver had seen in years. Vancouver newspapers ran sensational headlines about the crumbling Trump Tower. Images of the fallen panels circulated on social media. People shared videos of workers boarding up the building. National media in Toronto and Montreal picked it up. International outlets were reporting on it. CNN covered it. The BBC was interested. Here was one of the world's most expensive buildings, the tallest residential tower in the province, literally falling apart before it was even fully occupied. Homeowners who had paid millions of dollars were being told they couldn't live in their apartments. The building that was supposed to be a symbol of Vancouver's arrival as a world-class city was turning into an embarrassment. The story had everything the media wanted: luxury, failure, a famous name, and real danger. And it was happening in real time, in front of the world. Donald Trump's camp went into damage control. They made statements saying they were confident in the building's safety. They said the issue was being addressed. They said it was a normal part of construction that would be resolved quickly, but the damage to the brand was already done. Westbank, the developer, faced a bigger problem. They had sold hundreds of units in this building. People had paid millions of dollars to live here. They had signed contracts. They had put down deposits. Some people had already moved in. Now they were learning that the building had a fundamental defect. They wanted answers. They wanted to know if their units were safe. The investigation revealed something that nobody expected. It wasn't just one issue. It was multiple issues working together. The thermal stress was real. But there were also defects in how some of the panels had been manufactured. There were issues with the installation. There were problems with the building's envelope design that hadn't been anticipated during the planning phase. Westbank brought in one of Canada's top engineering firms. They began replacing every single window panel on the building. This wasn't a quick fix. This was a massive undertaking. Crews had to go panel by panel, floor by floor, around the entire 36-story tower. They had to remove the old panels. They had to inspect and repair the installations. They had to install new panels that had been redesigned to handle the thermal stress better. The project took months. Then it took a year. The costs spiraled. Westbank ended up spending tens of millions of dollars on the window replacement alone. Some estimates put the total cost of fixing the problem at over $40 million. That added another 5% to the building's construction costs. But the panel replacement wasn't the only thing happening. The investigation also revealed that the building had other issues. There were problems with the waterproofing. There were drainage issues. There were problems with the mechanical systems. Some of these issues were serious enough that they required additional repairs. Residents who had already moved in were living in a construction zone. Crews were constantly working on the exterior. Scaffolding covered the building. Safety nets were installed. There was noise. There was disruption. People couldn't open their windows because they were doing repairs outside. Their views, which they had paid millions of dollars to enjoy, were sometimes obscured by safety scaffolding, worker platforms, and equipment. Residents reported feeling trapped. They had signed contracts to live in a luxury tower. They had paid premium prices, often millions of dollars per unit. They expected stunning views of the city and water. Instead, they got ongoing construction, uncertainty about their investment, and the knowledge that the building they lived in had fundamental design flaws. Some residents demanded refunds. Others filed complaints with real estate authorities. Lawyers got involved. Class action lawsuits were being considered. The developer had to answer questions from angry homeowners who demanded to know how this had happened and whether their units would ever be safe. People started asking questions. How did this happen? How did a company with Westbank's reputation, working with an architect of international stature, design a building that was fundamentally flawed? How did the engineering firms miss this during the planning phase? How did the manufacturers not catch the defects in the glass? How did quality control fail so spectacularly? Some of the answer came down to complexity. This building was trying to do things that had never been done before in Vancouver. The curved facade was beautiful, but it was also technically challenging in ways that the design team didn't fully appreciate until construction was underway. The angles weren't standard. The panels weren't standard sizes or shapes. The installation methods were custom and had never been tested on a building this large or in Vancouver's climate. When you're doing something that's never been done before, when you're breaking new ground, there's inherently a higher risk that something will go wrong. You're in uncharted territory. The tests that were done in controlled environments didn't fully replicate the real-world conditions. The simulation models didn't account for all variables. And once the building was completed, it was too late to go back and redesign the system. Some of the answer came down to oversight and climate considerations. The building's design had been developed primarily in New York by a world-renowned architecture firm known for innovative designs. But they hadn't built a tower in Vancouver's specific climate before. That was a critical gap. Vancouver gets a lot of rain, more than 50 inches per year on average. It has significant temperature fluctuations between seasons. The summers are warm but not extreme, usually in the 70s. The winters are mild but damp, usually in the 40s. But the sun intensity can be very high in spring and summer. The building's envelope had to be designed to handle moisture and temperature changes in a very specific way. The system that might work perfectly in New York's climate, with its hot, dry summers and cold, clear winters, might fail catastrophically in Vancouver's wet, mild climate. That lesson hadn't been learned when the design was finalized. The New York-based team didn't fully account for how Vancouver's weather patterns would affect the building's performance. Some of the answer came down to schedule and market pressure. This was a high-profile project with enormous expectations. Donald Trump's name was on it, which meant the eyes of the world were watching. The developer was eager to complete it and start generating revenue. Units were pre-sold, and buyers were eager to move in. Residents were eager to get into their new homes. Market conditions in 2013 and 2014 were favorable for luxury real estate sales. There was demand. There was momentum. Missing the completion deadline would have been costly. There might have been pressure internally to move fast, to approve things quickly, to not slow down for additional testing or quality checks that might delay the project. In the pressure to finish on time and meet market demand, something critically important got overlooked. The building's systems weren't tested adequately. The thermal performance wasn't modeled for Vancouver's actual weather patterns. The glass installation methods weren't proven on a building with this specific geometry. And once construction started, there wasn't time to stop and reconsider. By mid-2015, most of the window replacement was complete. The building stabilized. Residents settled in. The crisis faded from the headlines, but the damage to the Trump organization's reputation in Canada was permanent. They had gotten into the Canadian market with a spectacular failure. It raised questions about whether their international projects were getting the attention and quality control they needed. For Westbank, the experience was painful, but ultimately survivable. They owned the building. They took responsibility for fixing it. They didn't try to blame the window manufacturer or the architect or the climate. They fixed the problem and moved forward. Westbank has built many successful projects since Trump Tower, and they've built them much more carefully. The window manufacturer was sued immediately when the full scope of the problem became clear. The manufacturer had supplied the glass panels, and they had responsibility for their quality and performance. Some of the lawsuits were settled out of court. The manufacturer paid money to Westbank as compensation for having to replace all the panels. Some lawsuits went to trial. Westbank sued the installer for improperly installing the panels. Westbank sued the architecture firm for inadequate design and testing. The architecture firm's insurance company got involved. There were disputes about who was responsible for what. In the end, liability was shared among multiple parties because everyone had some part in the failure. The manufacturer had responsibility for the quality of the glass. The installer had responsibility for putting the panels in correctly. The design team had responsibility for not adequately testing the system and not accounting for local climate conditions. And Westbank had responsibility as the developer for not catching the problems during construction and for approving a system that hadn't been properly tested. The total cost of the lawsuits, settlements, and legal fees ran into the millions of dollars. Years later, Trump Tower Vancouver became a case study in engineering schools, architectural programs, and building science departments across North America. Engineering schools used it in their curriculum. They taught students about what happens when you don't adequately test new systems before installation, when you don't account for local climate conditions in your design, when you prioritize speed and schedule over quality and testing, when you assume that what worked somewhere else will work everywhere. Architects studied it in their professional development courses. They learned about the importance of climate-specific design and local knowledge. Developers studied it as a cautionary tale about cutting corners and rushing to market. Building manufacturers and installers studied it to understand how even premium products can fail if they're not properly installed or if the system isn't designed correctly. Window manufacturers completely revised their testing protocols. They started running thermal cycling tests to simulate years of temperature changes in accelerated timeframes. They started testing their products in the specific climates where they would be installed. The industry learned from Trump Tower Vancouver's failure, and subsequent buildings benefited from that learning. The building still stands today. It's still one of Vancouver's most prominent towers. People still live in it. It's still worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The window panels that replaced the original ones have proven reliable. The building, once the crisis was over, is no different from any other luxury tower in the city. But the story of those falling panels, that moment when $800 million worth of real estate literally came crashing down, remains one of the most dramatic moments in Vancouver's architectural history. What makes this story important isn't just that something went wrong. It's that it went wrong at the highest level. It went wrong in a high-profile project. It went wrong despite having access to the best engineers, the best architects, the best materials, and unlimited funding. It went wrong because of human error, because of assumptions that weren't tested, because of systems that looked good on paper but didn't work in reality. And it went wrong in a way that nobody could miss. Those window panels didn't fall quietly. They announced the failure loudly. They made news. They scared people. They forced everyone involved to stop and fix it immediately. The lesson Vancouver learned that day was simple but profound. You can have the best name on the building. You can have the biggest budget. You can have the most famous architect. You can have every expert telling you it will work. But if you don't test your systems in the actual environment where they're going to exist, if you don't account for the specific conditions of the place you're building, if you assume that what worked somewhere else will work here, you can still fail, and you can fail spectacularly. Trump Tower Vancouver recovered from the crisis, but it never escaped the association with those falling panels. That moment defined the building more than any luxury amenity ever could. It's remembered as the tower that fell. Not because it literally collapsed, but because the details that nobody was supposed to think about suddenly became impossible to ignore. Today, if you walk past Trump Tower Vancouver, you might not think about that story. You might just see a luxury building like dozens of others in the city. You might not know about the window panels. You might not know about the tens of millions spent fixing them. You might not know about the investigation or the lawsuits or the humiliation for everyone involved. The building looks fine now. The windows are intact. Life goes on. But the people who were there know. The residents know. The engineers know. The architects know. West Bank knows. And somewhere, at the Trump Organization headquarters, they definitely know. Because that $800 million project in Vancouver, the one that was supposed to announce their arrival in the Canadian market with a statement of confidence and success, instead announced something else entirely. It announced that no matter how much money you spend, no matter how famous the name you put on the building, no matter how many experts you hire, the basic laws of physics and material science still apply. And if you don't respect them, if you don't test your systems properly, if you don't account for local conditions, they will humiliate you in front of the entire world. That's the story of Vancouver's Trump Tower, the tower that fell. Not all at once, not dramatically or catastrophically, but slowly, piece by piece, window by window, in a way that nobody saw coming and nobody could ignore once it started happening. It's a story about ambition, about pushing boundaries, about trying to do something unprecedented. But it's also a story about the costs of failure when you don't do your homework, when you don't test your assumptions, when you assume that what worked in one place will work in another. If you found this story interesting, subscribe for more deep dives into the moments when ambition crashes into reality. Because those moments tell us something important about how the world actually works, not how we think it should work. I'll see you in the next one.